that you see on your end that it says in the corner that it's recording?
Yes.
Cool. And then I'll start an introduction and we'll go from there, okay?
Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Russell with Ink and Paper Blog, and I am here today to do an exciting video with a special guest. I have to welcome Hunter from Shelf by Shelf, and we're talking about the National Book Award today.
Woo! I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to have you. Thank you so much for being on my channel. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me. Like, I've watched your videos for so long now. It's kind of crazy.
I am so excited. And you guys, Hunter's Instagram will be down below in this video. You have to follow him. First, follow him for books, and then follow him for his play-by-play of Dawson's Creek, which will entertain you like no business, and then his work shenanigans. I love it so much. So please follow him. And he's an inspiration when it comes to reviewing books. So you guys will love him. Hunter, do you like the National Book Award?
Oh, I'm obsessed with the National Book Award. It's okay, so I'll do a very, very quick story. When I was younger, I knew about the Pulitzer, and I always wanted to win the Pulitzer. I partly found out about it because of Tennessee Williams, and I was obsessed with him. And then I slowly learned about all these other awards. And then back in 2015, when both A Little Life and Fates and Furies were both on the short list, I was like, I must have great taste because I love both of these. I was like, I've read so many on the list. I was like, I'm gonna start predicting. And so I started predicting them, and now it's like a thing, like I'm like addicted to it.
And you're very, very good at it.
This is the first, it's so funny because last year I got 8 out of 10 on the fiction long list.
How about this year?
This year was not, I got 4 right altogether, but I'd read 5 of them. But this was a tough year.
Yes. Yeah, so yeah, I'm obsessed with the National Book Award. I love it because I do love a good long list. And I do love that it tends to celebrate so many different types of books. It's never like one note. It definitely is very eclectic. So what were your initial reactions to this year's list?
So while I was surprised by some books that were omitted and some that there were just some I didn't expect to see. I was excited about it because I love getting stuff wrong when it comes to these kind of things, because it means that I have a lot more books to discover and pick up. And especially there was 2 or 3 that I'd heard of them, but I hadn't really had them on my radar until now. But yeah, I'm excited by it though.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I expected to see a few more on there that I just thought had to be on there. But I did really think that it's one of those lists where every book that they talk about, I'm like, oh, I would read that. Oh, I would read that. So, and this judging panel, Roxane Gay, Rebecca Mackay, Christina Enriquez, I can't even remember all of them, but it is one heck of a judging panel.
I think that's part of what is exciting, is that you've got this very eclectic group of people who, I guess that, you wouldn't really expect, you just wouldn't really expect them to kind of, I don't know, altogether. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there one book that you just really wished had been on the list that isn't?
I will say, I thought Jessie, her Transcendent Kingdom, I expected that to be on there just because Homegoing wasn't when it came out on the long list, and I expected that to be. So I just thought, oh, well, maybe she'll be like, how the Oscars, they always have that it's here's all your hard work. And I expected that because I did love Transcendent Kingdom, but I'm also not surprised. And also, I expected Real Life because I know it got, because I loved Real Life and I thought about how much praise it got. But then after I thought about it, I wasn't surprised because it reminded me of when the year that Lincoln and the Bardo won the Booker Prize, I had guessed a lot of Booker of the Booker long list, and then I realized, okay, I'm thinking too experimental for a National Book Award, and I think that that's what I thought with Little Life. So I guess that like there were some I wanted on there, but then I thought about it and I was like, it makes sense. It wouldn't be. And How Much of These Hills Is Gold? I wanted it on there, but the more I thought about it, the more I feel like it's a Pulitzer.
Yeah, I agree. I will not be surprised if Real Life winds up on the Pulitzer threesome.
Yeah.
I definitely think that one. I really was rooting for Garth Greenwell's Cleanness to make the list. I just think he's one of those authors that's doing something so different.
Yeah.
And I just really, I know his first book was on the long list, but it didn't make the short list.
Right.
So I was really hoping to see him there just because I think he's so innovative and amazing in what he writes. But
it's funny you bring that one up because I was rereading. I reread like 3 different sections of Cleanness on Sunday just randomly because it's so good and his sentences are so great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's a writer. Like when you pick up his book, you feel everything that he puts on the page. So yeah. Well, I mean, it's pretty exciting. So I thought what we would do today is we would just kind of go back and forth. We're not going to review the books, guys, because let's be honest, we have some reading to do. But we can do some initial reactions, talk a little bit about what they're about, and then go from there. I just have them in alphabetical order by author. So I'll hold them up. I know you have them too, most of them sitting next to you. So if you want to hold them up while you're talking too, but we'll go back and forth. But I'll start us off because the first book on the list is the only book that's not out yet. Mm-hmm. And that is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. Do you know how to say his first name exactly?
I think that's right.
Okay. And this is coming out in October from Ecco. Mm-hmm. And this is a book that got on my radar because Roxane Gay actually reviewed it some time ago and raved about it. And it got picked up for like a TV series already.
Okay.
So it's going to be like a Netflix series, but it's the story of a couple and their 2 children that rent like an Airbnb home out in the countryside of New York. And one night, this other couple shows up and claims to be the owners of the house and say that New York is just like gone black. There's nothing going on. And they wind up saying that they need to stay there, that they've sort of escaped there. And now it's like, there's no TV, there's no phones. They can't even check the story. So now it's like these 2 families in this little space not knowing what's going on, which I think sounds fantastic.
No, I'm excited. Well, I loved, I liked Rich and Pretty. I loved his last novel, That Kind of Mother. It actually reminded me a little bit of Little Fires Everywhere.
Okay.
But I'm excited because I feel like he's one of those that's been kind of under the radar. So this is an exciting one for me.
Yeah. Well, and I'm obsessed with him on Twitter because, you know, him and his husband have their adopted children and they're just so cool, like the way they talk about life and stuff. So I think he is amazing. So I think this is the one that I was really excited to see on the list because it was one I wanted to read. So cool. Leave the World Alone, Rumaan Alam, out from Ecco in October. Hopefully we can get you a copy.
And it's, if not, I have it pre-ordered, it's fine. But I'm like dying to read it now. But
Yes. What's next on the list? I'm actually glad you're going to be able to talk about Christopher's book. Because I will be honest, this is the one book on the list I knew nothing about.
Oh, okay. I just started this one. I don't have the full cover. I took it off, but yeah. The Index of Self-Destructive Acts. So it's from Tin House.
Yes.
And I adore Tin House. They're a smaller press and they've released a lot of great books, but this one, it wasn't real. I'd seen it and I thought, but it also just didn't look like a book that would be on my radar. And then I read the first chapter today and it was so good that I was mad at myself for not picking it up because it's one of those books that it feels like, at least from, because I don't know if you know this, but I don't actually look at what books are about before I start them. I just go in blind, or you can't say go in blind. I go in not knowing anything. And I don't know. I don't know. I'm very excited about it, but it's about this guy who he created this software that helps you like predict a certain, it's very complicated. Long story short, he created something, and then he sold it when he was really young and didn't know about business. And then he had to like go into another business because he wasn't making any money off of it. And there's a lot of stuff about baseball and politics. And that sounds very convoluted and vague, but it makes so much sense, I'm sure, in a blurb.
Well, I just know that it's like about a guy that winds up, like, he joins a newspaper and he winds up going on an interview for this family or something, and they have all sorts of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And I've heard it's like messy but fantastic in so many ways. And I'm not always huge for a baseball novel. Like, I'm not a big baseball guy. But if done well, I can buy in.
Do you know what it reminded me of? A little tiny bit was, just a little bit, was The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay.
Love that book.
Just in how epic it feels, like that kind of like when you first start it and it just feels like so much is happening. That was how it kind of felt to me. But not, I say that comparison a little bit loosely though, because I don't want to like have these like crazy high expectations and then disappointment.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I think I'm really excited. I'm always excited when the long list comes out and there's a book that I have had nothing about. Because like you, I love to go in a little bit, you know, okay, I don't know enough. I want to know just enough to want to read it, but not too much to ruin it. Yeah. So I'll hold up the cover. It's The Index of Self-Destructive Acts by Christopher Beha? Is that how you would say his name?
Yeah, that's how I would say it. And it also it also reminds me of the Throwback Special when that came.
Okay.
That was not just in how it was one of those books that's like, it's about sports sort of, but it's also not. Yeah. And I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think the third book on the list, everyone sort of expected to see there, The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. Yeah.
I kind of think everyone knew that this was going to be on the list. Brit Bennett was a winner of the 5 Under 35 award when The Mothers came out. So she's been on the National Book Awards radar for quite some time. Very briefly, this is the story of two sisters, both that can, in a lot of ways, come from a community where everyone sort of passes for white. And one sister stays within the community and one disappears. And it's really their family saga. Did you love this book?
Listen, I am a Brit Bennett stan. I was a huge fan of The Mothers. Her sentences are so... the sentences themselves remind me almost of Maya Angelou and how the musicality of it is. And I love that.
There's something, you know, I know a lot of people sort of sometimes look down at books and say, oh, it's so readable. And I think that Brit Bennett is readable in the best of ways. Yes. Like, you really can just get lost in her story, in her people, in her characters, and you're just along for a fantastic ride.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I think you're right. It has a lot of commercial appeal.
Yes.
But I think that's kind of, people throw that around in a kind of shady way, but I think you're right. I think it's very, there's such fluidity in her language, her use of language, and especially even in how she like flows through time and character. And I think it's very deserved to be on the list. Yeah, and you know what?
She handles her characters with such love and compassion that you really find such a place in your heart for them, which not all authors are great at doing that. So I'm excited that she's getting the recognition for this book. I just knew that it would be there on this list. So I'm glad. I'm really, really glad. So yeah, Brit Bennett. Oh, I should hold it up again, Russell. The Vanishing Half, Brit Bennett, out from Riverhead. Everyone should read it because it's really that good.
It's on my top 10 of the year so far. So
oh, well, that's good. That's good. See, big recommendations for Hunter here. What's next, Hunter? Do you remember? It's our first short story collection.
If I Had Two Wings?
Yes.
Okay.
By Randall Kenan?
Yes, who just passed recently.
I know.
Devastation. But this is like, all I know is like Southern.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I know, but I love that.
Well, if you can't tell, Hunter may have a little bit of Southern in it. All I know is that it's based in North Carolina, and I happen to know that he is a professor in the North Carolina State area. Jill McCorkle, who is an author that I absolutely love, when he passed, did a brilliant tribute to him. And Roxane Gay actually posted that one of like her saddest things was the fact that they had made a decision that this book was going to be on the long list before he passed, and he never found out. So that's great that he's getting the recognition, but that's so sad too in a lot of ways. But like you, I don't know a lot about it. I don't know a lot about this collection.
But you don't like short stories.
I'm not a huge fan, but I will say the National Book Award has always introduced me to short story collections that I've wound up loving. Heads of the Colored People by Thompson was phenomenal.
I compared that one too. I compared it to Crazy Sexy Cool, the album from TLC, because it's like hit after hit after hit.
Absolutely. And that, I think, is my thing with short story collections, is whenever there's like a dud, for me, it may not be a dud for everybody, it can kind of derail me a little bit in a collection, but I try to read them very separately, space them out. But so that is what I love. I love Lauren Groff, but I would never have read Florida if it hadn't been on the long list, because I wouldn't have gone for her short story collection. I've read everything but that book. Came up, read it, loved it. So, who am I? I do love a good short story collection. So I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, I love short stories. Like, I'm a sucker for them, and I love Southern anything. So it sounds right up my alley.
For me, if it's Southern and it has really good food descriptions, I'm usually really bought in, because Southern food is delicious. So, and Hunter, you're a short story writer, because I follow you, and I know I see the trials and tribulations of your life as a writer. So
it's a lot. It's fine. It's fine. It's a journey.
Well, I can't wait until one time we're doing a video like this and we're talking about your short story collection that's up for the National Book Award.
A dream.
The next book on the list is another book that I wasn't too surprised to see.
Oh, yeah.
Which is Burning. I always struggle with her name. Megha Mujumdar?
Mujumdar, I think Mujumdar.
Yes. And she is a editor at Catapult, which I love. Catapult, Counterpoint. I love them. They're so great. So how do you summarize a Burning?
I always listen, I'm really bad at this. All I ever say is that I think it's a literary political thriller set in India.
Set in India.
Yeah.
I know it has 3 characters, 3 different points of view. And I thought that this is one of the best, most well-rounded trans women characters that I've read from the point of view of a cisgender woman, probably ever. I loved that character. Her name's Loving, I think, or Lovely. But yeah, it's sort of like an act of terrorism and how it brings these 3 stories together.
Yeah, so. And I always tell people whenever they pick that up, I always say, like, read it in like 1 to 2 sittings. Don't keep putting it down, because I think that if you keep the pace up, it really does lend itself to that really well.
It's compelling page to page, I think. Yeah, I totally agree. And it was probably one of the biggest anticipated debuts of this year, along with Real Life. I mean, it had as much press as that. So I'm excited for her, because she seems absolutely lovely. And it's a really good book.
It is really good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. The next book you're going to talk about this. So I've read 4, and I'm in the middle of the 5th. And the 5th one is the one you're about to talk about, a children's Bible.
Oh, okay.
And you've read this one, right?
I have. I read this. I read this in like 2 sittings. It's I love Lydia. I don't know how to say her last name.
I would say Millet.
Okay. I love her. I read Sweet Lamb of Heaven back whenever it was on the long list. The same year that Garth Greenwell's What Belongs to You was on the long list. She does such a beautiful job of writing these they're just like such fast-paced, great, deep. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but this one it's about like a bunch of rich kids who are trying to make it through some type of apocalyptic event, basically. And there's a lot of religious imagery, but it's also about climate change. And I loved this one. I did not love the ending, but I don't think it like took away from my experience of the book. But she's just she's so good. She's so talented. Like, and it's so understated.
She I'm only halfway through of it. It's so allegorical to me. Yes. But it's almost, I mean, I know it's called a children's Bible, but it does have sort of that Bible story feel to it. And you're sort of a step back, but you really are watching things develop from almost an omnipotent point of view. And I'm really, really enjoying it. Really enjoying it. So
I'm glad you're liking it. I was nervous because some people have it, it's fine.
I can see why it may not be a book for everybody.
Yeah.
But I don't need a lot of plot. I'm more about the substance sometimes, and this book is more substance than actual plot. So
yeah.
So the next book is the other book. I don't know if you had heard about it when it popped up, but that was The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deshaw. Philia? I don't know how to say her last name. Philia?
Philia. Yeah.
Yeah. I read this yesterday.
Okay.
I mean, I literally sat down and read this book in about 2 hours. It's a short story collection, Hunter, about Black women in the South. It's got queer representation. It's about religion. It's about the patriarchy. It's about strong women saying no. And it's about love and conquering sort of those things. There's one story in the middle, I think it's called like Snowfall. At the end of it, tears down my face, just so heartwarming. I was totally bought in.
It's so funny because Tracy at the Stacks Pod on Instagram and Jenna Reads Books on Instagram both either have read it or are currently reading it. And they were like the first to put it on my radar. And I literally made a joke to Jenna. I said, watch this get shortlisted and I'm not going to mention it, or longlisted. And she was like, oh, haha, that'd be so funny. And then it was. But besides that, I hadn't heard about it. But it sounds right up my alley. It sounds so good. And I saw that you liked it on Twitter or somewhere. So
there's a whole entire section where she makes peach cobbler for an entire story. I have never wanted peach cobbler so much in my entire life. But I love that it's from West Virginia University Press. I didn't even know they had a press. So how exciting for them to have something on the long list. So
yeah. Well, it reminded me of how Barren Island a couple years ago was from a
university press. Yeah. That's right. That's right. I personally think that's going to be a fave of yours that you didn't hear about or didn't know you wanted to read, and then you're going to read it and you're going to be like, goodness, it's so good. It is very, very good. I get to do the next one because I think it's the only one you don't have your hands on. So this is Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stuart. It really needs no introduction. I mean, it's shortlisted for the Booker, long-listed for the National Book Award. And it's set in the 1980s in Glasgow, and it's the story of a young boy and his alcoholic mother and their sort of relationship. I've heard nothing but rave reviews. Everybody.
You haven't?
No, I just got it. So, I am excited about it. It's a little bit hyped for me, and I struggle with books that are overhyped. So I'm a little worried.
I'm nervous because Alexander Chee said he was, I don't know if he's read it, but he said he was excited about it. And I love Alexander Chee, so I will take that. But it also sounds so similar to so many other books I've liked that I'm like, is it going to just feel like a rehash of something else or...
Yeah, I kind of, when I first started to hear about it, I was like, is this just like a fictional retelling of Angela's Ashes? Popped into my head like right away. And I was like, oh, I got to get that out of my head because if I don't, I'm going to struggle with it. But people love this book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's, and it's probably the longest book on the list too, because it's a bit of a chunkster, so.
Is it?
I mean, it's 430 30 pages. I mean, that's not too bad, but
no, because I think the Christopher Beha, the self-destructive acts one is 517 pages.
oh, you're right. That book weighs, like you feel that book.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm so excited for you to talk about the next one because we both finished it over the weekend, and I know we both loved it. Oh, so good, right?
The Great Offshore Grounds by Vanessa Veselka. I loved this book. It's going to be my top 10 of the year. It is so good. Like, so I love epic sweeping stories. I said this to somebody else, and then I saw that Roxane Gay said the same thing, was that this is the first time I've ever read a book that I felt that an author truly understood poverty on such a realistic level, and in such a current way that just felt very, it felt very like, it's hard to explain, but it felt like you could just feel the need for more.
There's like such a visceral nature to the words, and it's the story of these three siblings that are siblings really only by coincidence almost.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, and their relationships, but they all go on very different journeys, and they're all so compelling.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I think that's something I loved about it, was that all three kids and the matriarch of this,
Yes.
I think that all of them had such different, interesting, compelling stories, and there was never a point where I thought, I don't like this character or the story. I was invested equally in all of them. And it's so rare to find a book that can do that. And also, it in some ways reminded me of how Joyce Carol Oates really will tackle a longer story, just in how she will go on these little tangents here and there and have little moments that just kind of, they wander off on their own, but you feel like it still exists outside of the story.
Yeah.
And I loved that.
Yeah, and I love a book that gives you a little bit of heartbreak, the whole book, and you're just sort of sitting there on the edge. And this book resolves in many different ways, but there were tears there. This is definitely a tear book.
Yeah, like, this is not a spoiler, but there is a moment where the matriarch of the story, she's telling a story about, she's driving through somewhere going really fast, and she's just kind of describing this one moment towards the end of a chapter, and it was just so beautifully done. I'm literally like, feeling teary-eyed now just thinking back to it because it was so good. I need everyone to read it.
Yeah, no, everyone needs to read it. And I'm glad I knew about this book, but I didn't know how good this book was until I was like, well, if it's making the long list, I have to. And then I think it maybe took me a couple days to read, and it's not a short book.
No.
Yeah.
No, I was very lucky. I got my copy from Knopf. They sent it before, like back in August, and I was like, oh, I want to read this because it's a pretty cover. And hey, like I said, I don't know what books are about, so I judge them by their covers, even though you're not supposed to. And then I started it because I was like, I need to read this. And then randomly, after I started it, I was like, oh wow, this will be on the long list. I just know it. And then it was.
Yeah. Knopf sent it to me as well, and I was like, sometimes I'll get a book that I don't request or I haven't talked to anyone about, and I'll be like, well, they must think there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
And they were right. That book is a treasure. So there's only one book left.
Have you read this one?
I haven't. So tell me about Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, who is also one of the winners of the 5 under 35 from the National Book Foundation.
Or How to Live Safely in a Science Fictional Universe. Which, side note, I took from that book to do a monologue back in high school and won an award for it. So thank you, Charles Yu. But this is about, it's hard to explain, but it's basically about like, it's like a satire about the way that I guess Hollywood, as well as just like America, views Asian people with these different like generic, like there's like he at one point he talks about wanting to be like kung fu guy, and then there's like generic Asian man and stuff like that, and it's just these different what do you call it? Where like
Stereotypes?
yes, these different stereotypes and it's basically the story of what it's hard to explain. I'm really bad at this, like I said.
You're
But
doing good.
but it's I will say this was not my favorite as far as like being deeply invested in it, but I loved the way that it discussed race, and it felt very self-aware in a way that never felt it never felt like it was like aware of how like uncomfortable in its self-awareness. It felt very self-assured. And despite my hesitance with the format, because it's written like a script in a lot of it, I still really it ended up being, it wasn't distracting like I thought it would be.
Yeah, the style is definitely unique. Its style stands out in this list. So yeah, I have seen this book, I don't know how many times. I've almost bought it 100 times. So I was happy to see it on the list, but it really came out of nowhere for me. I hadn't heard anyone talking about it as a possibility for that list, which is exciting for him and exciting for who published this. Oh, Pantheon. Good for Pantheon. I think this is their book on the list, so.
Well, and this is going to sound shady, and I don't mean for it to, but there's somebody on Instagram who read it, and they don't read a lot of literary fiction, and they loved it. And so I was like, it's probably not, which I know sounds cool, but like sometimes you know people's taste, and they don't, if somebody doesn't like literary novels, I'm like, well, I'll just like nix that from my list. And now I regret it. It's fine.
Yes, yes. It's a pretty strong and interesting long list. I'm excited about it.
I'm excited too. I think it'll be really interesting. I think that a lot of these will be great conversation starters. And also they're also pretty. I don't know. I'm a sucker for a good cover.
For me, I keep thinking like I'm glad I'm not judging this group because they are all so vastly different. It's like, how do you compare and choose, from this group what will move on and which will eventually win. So, because I remember last year when the Nickel Boys didn't make it to the short list, I just didn't understand. But then I was like thinking about it, and I was like, if you compare all of them, something's going to stand out that maybe doesn't stand out for anyone else. So,
yeah, that's true. I will say, I knew, like, you didn't like Trust Exercise.
Did not.
But I knew it. I read it. I read that in a bathtub in one tubbing, and I knew right away it was going to be the book of the year, and it was. Maybe
what's so funny, Hunter? When I reviewed that book on my channel, I literally said, this book was written to win awards, and that's what drives me crazy about it. And then when it won, I was like, I'm not surprised, because it's sort of like that. It's written for writers, it's written for authors, it's written for critics. And I was just like, I get it, but I did not care for it. But that's the beauty of literature, right? And we can like some things and not like others.
And I do think I will say this is, speaking of that, I will say, from what I've read of these, I don't know if any one of them was written specifically for awards. Like, they all feel like they were genuinely written for an audience to enjoy.
Yes.
Which I really appreciate.
Yes. And I feel like each author had something to say. At least I'm, almost through my fifth one. And all of those, I feel like there's a clear point of view in the story. And I feel like they want me to get something out of it. Sometimes, you read a book and the author has ideas and you don't get them. Like, they're just way up here. Yeah. I just feel connected to the books that I've read so far. So I'm really excited about finishing this list.
Yeah, me too. I think I'm on book 7.
See, you are a speed demon when it comes to reading too. So, is there one book that you've already read that you're like, gosh, this one's got to make the short list?
I would be surprised if, I think that The Great Offshore Grounds and The Vanishing Half are the two I would love to see on the short list.
I definitely agree with you on The Great Offshore Grounds. I would love to, I want as many people to read that as possible. So if it makes the short list, I loved the Vanishing Half. I'm not sure it did enough to sort of elevate to that next level for me, but I wouldn't be sad to see it there. So, you know, and I'm always excited for one of the short story collections to make the list, because not enough people read short stories, including myself. So,
I'm excited. I would hope, like, I would be happy, actually. I'd be happy if both of them made it, but I would definitely be happy just because of, like, what's, you know, if I had two wings, just because of his passing. Listen, I'm a very emotional person, so if that made the short list, I'd be...
Yeah. Can you remember, I mean, we'll just do this as a last aside before we write up. I couldn't remember the last time a short story collection won.
Was it Fortune Smiles?
I think you're right. I think you're right. Yes. And I met Adam Johnson for The Orphan Master's Son right before he won the Pulitzer, and he was phenomenal. So I was so excited for him to win for Fortune Smiles too. So he lives up the street. So he lives in San Francisco, so right up the way. So
he went to the FSU, or he like taught or something, and he was here for a signing for Fortune Smiles, and there's a big joke with other authors and me and Lauren Groff, and so every time I meet another author, they're always like joking about Lauren Groff, and he joked about her, and I said that she'd said that I was the love of her life. Just kidding. And then he was like, well, I'm your best friend for reals.
He's great. He's so funny. He's so funny. So yeah, I was certain that James Brinkley's The Lucky Man was going to win when it was on the short list, because I thought it was just one of those short story collections that did something new and interesting and had a voice. So I'll be interested to see. I don't know what's going to win. It's just a surprising list this year.
It is, but I'm excited.
I'm excited too. So we will have to come back, Hunter, once we're done and do a review.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. I have to thank you so much for being on my channel. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me.
And everyone, go follow him on Instagram, and he's the same on Twitter, right? Shelf by Shelf is you across Twitter and Instagram. Follow him. You will not be disappointed, I promise. So happy reading, guys. Until next time, thanks for coming along. Talk to you later. Bye, Hunter.
Bye.
So I'll stop the recording real quick.